The author of Plunder and Blunder, The Rise and Fall of the Bubble Economy, Dean Baker, joins us again to talk about the bailouts and the banks. Dean, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Thanks for having me on.
We really appreciate you coming on. I've seen you all over the news now talking about these issues. And first question I have, speaking of the news, is Dick Durbin right? Do the bankers run the place up in Congress?
Well, certainly you get that feel. I mean, it's remarkable that even after they've wreaked so much havoc, I mean, these guys are really responsible more than anyone else, at least in the private sector. I mean, Greenspan takes credit first and foremost, but in the private sector, the bankers are responsible for bringing on this disaster. You'd think they'd be kind of running for cover, but instead they're still lobbying Congress, and they prevented the bankruptcy reform that would have allowed bankruptcy judges to rewrite mortgage contracts just like any other contract into bankruptcy. They're still getting their way. So, I'd be inclined to agree with Senator Durbin. It sure looks like he's got a point.
I'm sorry, a quick follow-up on that. Do you have a sense of where the credit card bill is heading? Do you think that's going to pass, or are the banks going to win on that issue too?
Well, this is one you're going to have to watch the details. I think something will pass, but the question is how restrictive it will be when it takes effect, because there's talk about putting it off for a year or two so that they'll pass the law today, but won't actually come into effect, say, till 2011, which leaves a lot of opportunity for it to be changed so that, say, come the fall of 2010, maybe after the election, you get all these people saying, well, we can't possibly let that go through, it'll be too onerous. So a lot of this will be in the details. If it's a serious bill, then it takes effect soon. I mean, obviously it takes a little time, lead time, but it has to be soon. And it does put serious restrictions on interest rates and other penalties.
But it does seem as if it's something about which the president is certainly quite passionate and sort of out front on.
Well, he was also passionate about bankruptcy reform. He's become less so. I don't recall him saying anything before the votes in Congress, and I don't recall him saying anything after it was defeated. So I'm glad for his passion on it. I hope he keeps it. He didn't certainly on bankruptcy reform.
Yeah, which I guess there was a greater lapse. Go.
Yeah, again, to follow up on that, Dean, I don't know how they have this much power. Is it just the very simple act of giving all this money in contributions? Because, I mean, here they are. They're strong-arming the government. Simon Johnson, who used to be with the IMF, wrote, it looks like a kind of oligarchy that you would see in Russia or some other developing countries. They're so strong that they get Obama to even back down and basically to hush up on the previous bill, let alone all these Democratic senators who don't support this legislation.
I think the money's the campaign contributions are important, but they're not the whole story. They really managed to dominate thought. So you have very respected people. I'll mention Larry Summers, a very good economist. I've gotten a lot of value out of many of the papers I've read by him. He's out there saying this stuff like, oh, we have no choice. And there's a lot of people I know who don't particularly like the banks, but they're convinced we have no choice because they've heard someone like Larry Summers or someone else who's good economist, smart person, and they're inclined to give that credence. And certainly that's reflected in the media. So you get just kind of remarkable things. I mean, Larry Summers, the same weekend, when we had the flack over the AIG bonuses, he gave a speech. He was talking about we have to respect the sanctity of contract. At that very time, the Obama administration's auto team was insisting that the contract that had been signed with the auto workers years ago that gave retirees health benefits be violated. So how do you reconcile that? But because you have respected people saying this, it gets a lot of credence in the media who naturally defer to these people, and they're friends with them. So it's a lot of it is the campaign contributions, but it goes well beyond that. If we're just the campaign contributions and we have the media talking about how everyone's being ripped off, that won't do it.
Yeah, I sort of think that in this case especially, I think in general the idea of campaign contributions is somewhat overrated because I think
I don't disagree with you guys. That's why I'm so perplexed, because if it's not campaign contributions, what the hell is it? Why do they run the place so damn effectively when they should have zero credibility?
It's follow the money.
Point.
I mean, it's follow the money, and that literally, where do you follow? You follow to the bank. I mean,
well, you follow it everywhere. I mean, it's they're buying. Well, for example, they give a lot of money to Brookings, and I'm thinking here Robert Rubin. He set up an institute there that put out a lot of policy papers. Some of them were good papers, but the point is, obviously, this is something very influenced by a Wall Street perspective. Pete Peterson, an investment banker, made billions of dollars on Wall Street. He said there's actually two institutes. He has the Peter Institute for International Economics, which produces some good work, and then he has the Peter Peterson Foundation that's basically set up to cut Social Security and Medicare. So it's the campaign contributions are big, but it goes well beyond that. If we're just the campaign contributions, I think it would be stopped.
You know, that's really interesting, because in essence what they're doing, conservatives do this as well, in their own areas, and arenas, and spheres. They're buying ideas. They're buying the zeitgeist. And that's an amazing ability. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that that money could do that, but I think it has in this case, because it's not just that these people are getting campaign contributions or whatever, and Geithner's never gotten any campaign contributions. He's never run for office, but he seems to be the most captive to these ideas. It's almost as if they bought his brain.
I think something like that's true, and again, not to be pejorative about it, but I think he very much identifies with this Wall Street viewpoint. I mean, I don't think I've never met Tim Geithner, so I'm not saying anything from personal experience, but I do know many people who do know him. I don't think he thinks he's done a single thing that was in any way improper, but he totally associates with this Wall Street perspective. The New York Times had a great piece on this. I think it was last Sunday or Monday, and it was talking about how he had broken path with the past pattern of Fed shares, New York Fed shares, is the Fed of the New York Bank, New York Federal Reserve Bank. And in the past, it had always been the practice for the chairman of that bank, or president, I should say, of that bank, to take a top staffer with them when they had a meeting with one of the major bank heads, major bank executives, just to eliminate any appearance of impropriety. Geithner departed from that, and he would just go and have lunch or meet with them, have dinner, with no one else with him. Now, I don't think he did that because he was corrupt. I think it was quite the opposite. If he was doing it to be corrupt, it wouldn't have been hard to find someone to bring along and just tell them to keep their mouth shut.
Right.
I think he just saw absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, it's the mentality, and that piece has so many more damning things about Geithner. So let's get to that issue. We're talking to Dean Baker. He's the author of Plunder and Blunder, The Rise and Fall of the Bubble Economy. He's also the co-director for the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, D.C. So how about the bailouts? We have this issue of funneling more and more money into these banks when it seems that a lot of the top economists in the country say nationalize them. That seems to be in Geithner's mind and in Summers' mind an impossibility, even considering it. Does that by definition lead them down the wrong path?
I think so. I mean, to my mind, the path here is that you take them over. We do with them what we did with IndyMac, what we've done with any number of failed banks. There were just two more that failed over the weekend. Obviously, a Citibank, a Bank of America, they're much bigger. I mean, these are orders of magnitude bigger than what we've dealt with. But the idea that somehow it's impossible to do it, and that's what they've been trying to say, it's going to be difficult. You'd have to prepare for it. You wouldn't do it on a whim. The point is you set up a process so that you're in a position to do that. And if you don't do that, the alternative is, yes, you just keep throwing money at them. And we've thrown an awful lot so far.
Are the stress tests a joke?
Well, they aren't what stress tests are ordinarily intended to be. Stress tests are supposed to say, let's take a bad scenario. I mean, it's not ridiculously absurd. I mean, obviously we had 50% unemployment. Everyone's going to go under. But you take, like, what's the worst plausible scenario? And these tests are anything but that. I was reading through just today, actually, the assumptions. They actually look relatively optimistic to me. They're assuming 10.3% unemployment. I expect we're going to go well above that. In fact, I'd be happy about 10.3% unemployment. But given the way things are going, if we peak out there, I think that'd be a very optimistic story right now. The decline in house prices, they're assuming, I believe it's 14%. House prices are declining 2% a month. So I think they're a relatively optimistic story, and even with that, we're hearing there are leaks, and I guess we'll get the full results on Thursday, but both Citibank and Bank of America supposedly will need considerable amounts of additional capital, even after we've already given them tens of billions of dollars. So,
but was that the whole point of the stress test? I mean, they need more capital, hence we're going to give it to them? I thought when we first started out, the point of the stress test was, well, all right, if they don't pass the stress test, then we have to think about things like nationalizing them because they're basically insolvent.
Well, we still don't know, and again, this is one of the problems I see in this, that we still don't know. I mean, at least I don't know. You know, there hasn't been a clear statement that I could identify as to what happens if you don't pass the stress test. Paul Krugman was joking about it, how there was some statement that said, well, everyone's going to pass, and he called it, well, this is self-esteem week. You know, everyone passes. It's not clear. I mean, presumably, you would think if they don't have the capital they need, then it's some nationalization type process, but that's never been explicitly said. So I don't know. I don't think anyone could say, apart from those in the administration, what happens for those banks that don't pass the test.
Let me do a quick follow-up on that. Is there any chance that they've been waiting to surprise us, that they come out on Thursday and go, hey, you know what, Citibank, Bank of America, and 9 others, or 7 others, they didn't pass the stress test. We're taking them in.
I have friends who think that this is all a setup, that they're going through the motions, doing it piece by piece, and the argument being that they have to show there is no alternative, and in that way weaken the political opposition. I'd be happy to be surprised that way. I don't think so, but we'll find out soon enough.
We'll know in a couple of days. It's Dean Baker, whose new book, Plunder and Blunder, The Rise and Fall of the Bubble Economy, is available. Today the Fed chief, Ben Bernanke, spoke about how he expects the recession to be in 2009 to begin to wane at the end of 2009, which I guess is a piece of optimistic news from the Fed. The market didn't respond exactly the same way. It was about even today. It went down about 15 or 20 points. What do you make of what Bernanke is saying in the wake of the fact that we've been hearing about a deeper recession coming?
Well, first off, just to be clear on this, we should never look to the markets as a reactor of anything other than just random psychology. I mean, markets go up, markets go down, and half the time it's nothing at all to do with the economy, so I wouldn't put too much stock.
That's true, although the country has gotten accustomed to whenever the chairman of the Fed, whether it was Greenspan, and in a certainly much more exaggerated way, or Bernanke, to sort of look to see what the markets do in the wake of what either of those two men said. So
no, that's absolutely right. I consider bad practice, but you're right. You're right on that. Now, as far as what he's seeing, I don't see a lot of grounds for optimism. Now, just to be clear, the recession's not going to last forever. We're not going to end up with 30% unemployment. I mean, at some point, the economy will stabilize. But the trends right now are very strongly negative, and a lot of the green shoots that people were talking about a month ago turned out to be largely illusory. We're going to get a jobs report on Friday. I'll be shocked, really, if we don't lose at least 600,000 jobs in the month of April. The unemployment rate's almost certain to hit 9%. It's not going to stop. I mean, even in the best case scenario, I was just talking about a moment ago, you don't go from losing 700,000 jobs in April to losing 0 in May. So even in a best case scenario, what you would see is the rate of job loss begins to decline. So maybe we'll only lose 400,000 in May, 300,000 in June, and maybe by the fall we've stopped losing jobs, and that's really about the best story you could talk about. But at that
it's amazing the losses, Dean. When you hear that we're at a point in history, I remember the first quarter, Ford lost $1.4 billion. $1.4 billion, and that was great news, better than expected. And now, if we lose 400,000 jobs, that's really good news. It's a good trend. It's hard to countenance those numbers and hear them as good news. But I guess that's.
Well, it's really an extraordinary downturn, and again, one of the things that economists, we often focus on growth, and there's cause for that, but most people are thinking first and foremost of the labor market. What are their job prospects? Are they secure in their job? Could they get a raise? Can they get a new job if they lose their job? Can their kids get a job when they get out of school? And there's no story we could tell you where that's going to get better any time before late next year. That's really the best story we could tell you.
Dean, I want to go to another branch of this whole bailout economy issue, which is the toxic asset plan. Looking at the numbers behind that, is there any way that the American taxpayer doesn't get screwed? Or maybe they do get screwed, but it still works. Is that a possibility?
Well, this is where the nationalization issue comes in, because if you have some sort of takeover-type process, and we probably shouldn't use the nationalization, we'd say receivership, bankruptcy-type process, then we could wipe out the shareholders, wipe out or at least force the bondholders to take a haircut, make them take some losses. We still have to honor the insured deposits. We have some of the bonds that are insured. We have to make good on the government's commitments on what we're legally obligated to commit. But we could force the shareholders and bondholders to bear much of that cost. Now, I don't see a scenario in which we get away paying zero, but hopefully we won't have to pay trillions. And there are certainly scenarios you could talk about where you are talking about trillions of dollars, and that's real money, even in Washington.
So if you go with the toxic asset plan, instead of putting the pain on them, it puts the pain on the taxpayer.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're eating the assets, if we're somehow subsidizing their purchase or buying them outright, I mean, there are different formulations. Obviously, the one that's on the table now with the PPIP is basically we're subsidizing the purchase of these assets. That's a cost to the taxpayers, no doubt about it.
And coming back to the first question, is there any way that PPIP works?
Well, if you have generous enough subsidies, and these are pretty generous, then you could get these assets off the bank's books. Now, what I worry, well, two things. One is they may not be quite generous enough because the banks may not sell at those prices. Or alternatively, you could get a situation where they do sell off most of their assets, but they're getting more assets by the day. Keep in mind the toxic assets, the underlying issue here, are bad mortgages. Mortgages are going to default every single day, and on top of that, in the non-residential sector, we're seeing a huge flood of defaults as well. So even as we're clearing off a lot of bad loans off the bank's books, they're going to get more over the course of this year. So even whatever we might do by way of cleanup now may prove to be inadequate.
And, also, Dean Baker, I wanted to talk to you as we cover all these bases with the economy about the auto industry and about what happened with Chrysler. And I want to ask one sort of pointed and blunt question, having not very much to do with the economy, but then also to see sort of what your feelings are about how the news this week of Chrysler and Fiat and the bankruptcy of Chrysler will affect it in a broad way. But would you buy an American car now? Would you buy a Chrysler right now, as the president has admonished us to do?
It's a good question. And, well, actually, I guess it was almost 4 years ago that I last bought a car. I ended up buying a foreign car, and I really did try to get it. I was actually looking for a used car, and I ended up getting a new one. And I had to say, there really was a qualitative difference between it was a Japanese brand that I ended up buying and what we saw in the U.S.-made cars. I think they have real quality gap to make up. Now, hopefully, this plan will do it. In part, the story is that they're going to use technology from Fiat, which does have a good reputation, and they could make up that gap. I mean, I don't think there's anything intrinsic to a car being made in the U.S. In fact, you have many very good cars that are made in the U.S., some by UAW workers. People like to blame the union, but Toyota has a plant in California with UAW workers that they've been producing cars from for more than 20 years now. So there's no issue about producing cars in the U.S., no issue about UAW workers. It's pure and simply they haven't had well-designed products.
Dean, quick follow-up on that. Now conservatives are yelling and screaming that Obama is pressuring the hedge fund guys to take a significant loss on their investment in Chrysler, but that he's paying out UAW and that he has done some implicit and perhaps explicit threats against these investors and that this is heavy-handed and unacceptable. What's your take on that?
All right, well, just be really clear what these investors did. These were not people who bought the bonds years ago and they're taking a loss. These were people who bought up the bonds at 30 cents on a dollar, and they said, we're smart guys. We could push the Obama administration around, and we can get 40 cents on the dollar. We're tough guys. And Obama said, no, we got everyone else to accept 30 cents on the dollar. You're going to accept 30 cents on the dollar. Now, as far as his deal with the auto workers, you have people that work 30 years for their health benefits, and the government has said, no, you're going to give that up. You're not going to have the benefits that you worked for. Some of these people retired 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They're going to have to get lower health care benefits. They're not walking out like bandits. They're not happy. I mean, they're happy to still have their jobs that pay better than if they have to go work at a 7-Eleven. But they're making real concessions. So the idea that somehow the auto workers got a freebie, they're allied with Obama. Obama's trying to help them, but he's really made them take serious cuts. A lot of them are losing their jobs. So they're hardly getting off scot-free.
And wage concessions, too.
And wage concessions, absolutely. So they've given up an awful lot in this story. So the idea that he's just handing them everything on a silver platter, if you want to look for someone on a silver platter, Goldman Sachs, they got $12.9 billion of our dollars for, as far as I could tell, no good reason whatsoever through AIG.
That's absolutely true. Dean, final question for you, and we're talking to Dean Baker, co-director for the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington and the author of Plunder and Blunder. Are you concerned still at this point that at the end of all of this, the bailout, the stimulus, the PPIP, et cetera, that the Geithner and Summers plan basically does not work because they went down the wrong direction, they didn't push the banks into receivership, and then the economy turns a little more south, and then Obama's in a lot of trouble, the economy's in trouble, and he's run out of money. Is that a real concern?
Well, I'm more worried about him having run out of political capital. We're not near the end of the road in terms of money. We have a long, long way to go. I mean, I hate to say that, but it really is true. I mean, we could spend lots of money. It's not a reason to waste money, but we could spend a lot. But the bigger issue is that if he's identified with the banks, if he's seen as, right now no one blames him for this downturn. They know he walked in absolute disaster. But if they see him saying, my program's starting to work, and then 3 months out, 4 months out, 5 months out, things are worse than ever, and then he has to go back to Congress and ask for more stimulus, and the Republicans start yelling and screaming, he might not be able to get it. And in that story, we could be looking at a really long downturn.
All right, Dean Baker, his book is Plunder and Blunder. Michael's got one last question.
Give us one piece of good news. Send us away smiling, Dean.
Let's see. I think let me put one thing that will make a big difference in people's lives with the unemployment benefits. President Obama now is covering 65% of people's health insurance, which means a lot of people, when they lose their jobs, will still have health insurance, which will make a huge difference to them and their families.
There we go.
All right, there you go.
A rosy forecast from Dean Baker. The book's called Plunder and Blunder.